And greetings. Happy Tuesday. Welcome to the Steve Deace Show here live and on demand. I am back in the man cave with what is likely going to be our last 80-plus degree day of the year. We'll see. You know, it's going to be 50 in 48 hours. But just in case, it would really suck at the very end to get anaphylaxis after dodging these wasps all summer long. So we decided to play it safe today. Todd Erzin, Aaron McIntyre back there in our beloved studio. And of course, we are brought to you by our friends over at Birch Gold. As you continue to see more of the managed decline, the government debasement schemes, the open tax hikes being proposed by Kamala Harris, turn to where savvy investors and prosperous, wise people have turned for many, 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 many eons. As a hedge against government debasement schemes, it's called gold. And you can make that switch today, right now, by trusting the good people at Birch Gold Group. They will assist you in converting an existing IRA or 401k into an IRA in gold. And the best news, you won't have to pay a penny out of pocket to get it done. Just text the word Steve to 989-898 and get your free info kit on gold. No obligation, just information on fortifying your savings before they fortify the election. All right. With an A-plus rating from the Better Business Bureau, thousands of happy customers. You can trust Birch Gold too. Text Steve to the number 989-898 for your free info kit today. Again, text Steve to the number 989-898 for your free info kit today from our friends over at Birch Gold. And also, do not forget, election night is coming 1 week from today. You want to join us for our, we hope, fantastic presentation that we are planning for you at Blaze TV that will include yours truly. No spin, no fillers, just real talk, real analysis from the premise of what is actually true, not what can we get over on you. And if you want to subscribe so you don't miss anything we do on election night, get $40 off your annual subscription to Blaze TV right now. That's our biggest discount ever at blazeelection.com/Deace. Again, that's blazeelection.com/Deace. Get $40 off your Blaze TV subscription right now at Blaze TV or blazeelection.com/Deace. All right, coming up on the show today at the bottom of the hour, yet another opportunity to meaningfully push back on woke corporate culture. We'll tell you about that. Also, next hour, I'm going to make myself the subject of fake news or not. I'm going to lay out my final predictions for the 2024 election, and we're going to share them. And I'm going to let Todd and Aaron workshop it, critique it, question it, comment upon it, likely insult it. And we'll see if I'm fake news or not coming up in the next hour of the show. And then for Pop Culture Tuesday, one sports video to rule them all. I mean, this makes Leon Lett of 30 years ago look like a real Men of Courage parody. Okay. We will discuss that and see what themes we can extrapolate from this video coming up later on today in Pop Culture Tuesday. But let's get it going, and let's get it started as we always do with Aaron's rundown of what happened while we were away.
What happened while we were away, brought to you by Kiss Kiss Wang Wang. According to reporting at the UK Daily Mail, Democrat VP hopeful Tim Walz had a romantic fling with the daughter of a high-ranking Chinese Communist Party official during his teaching stint in the People's Republic back in 1989. Jetta Wang, now 59 years old, claims the VP hopeful showered her with gifts and seduced her. That's hard to believe. Their romance blossomed behind closed doors as they sipped tea, made love, and listened to George Michael hits, leading the then 24-year-old Wang to dream about marriage and a new life in the United States. No proposal, of course, was forthcoming from the future Minnesota governor, and the shame of being treated like a prostitute, she says, eventually left her feeling angry and suicidal. Moving on, Jeff Bezos, the owner of the Washington Post, released an op-ed yesterday excoriating his own paper and the broader news media for failing to earn the trust of Americans. He wrote, quote, "We must be accurate and we must be believed to be accurate. It's a bitter pill to swallow, but we are failing on the second requirement. Most people believe the media is biased. Anyone who doesn't see this is paying scant attention to reality, and those who fight reality lose. Reality is an undefeated champion. It would be easy to blame others for our long and continuing fall in credibility and therefore decline in impact, but a victim mentality will not help. Complaining is not a strategy. We will work harder to control what we can control and increase our credibility." Steve Bannon is now out of prison after being sentenced for contempt of Congress, and he was returned to his show this morning.
The 4 months in federal prison not only didn't break me, it empowered me. I am more energized and more focused than I've ever been in my entire life. And I can see clearly, just like in 2016 and in 2020, exactly what's going on here and what we have to do to defeat it.
Last night, CNN kicked right-winger Ryan Gardusky off their network after this absolutely based quip during a yelling match with pro-Hamas orc Mehdi Hassan.
If you don't want to be called Nazis, stop doing it.
You're called an anti-Semite more than anyone else at this table.
Yeah.
People will sit there and... No, by me. I never called you an anti-Semite. Okay. I mean, I'm not sitting here saying
I'm a supporter of the Palestinians, so I'm used to it.
Yeah, well, I hope your beeper doesn't go off. The thing is that...
Did you just say I should die?
You should not.
No,
Did you just say I should be killed?
No.
Kamala Harris, the queen of cringe, was back at it last night at one of her rallies.
Okay, now I want each of you to shout your own name. Do that.
I missed this over the weekend. At a Kamala rally, she had 10 abortionists, alleged, up on stage to talk about baby killing when someone in the crowd had a medical emergency.
Necessarily becoming ill and dying. Nationwide, I think someone needs some medical assistance over here.
For those of you listening, the alleged abortionist and his cohort acknowledged the medical emergency on stage, but not one of them gets down to help, almost like they're not really doctors. Incendiary devices ignited ballot drop boxes in both Vancouver, Washington, and Portland, Oregon over the weekend. Police say hundreds of ballots were destroyed in what they're describing as an act of arson. And finally, an oldie but a goodie. Would you vote for this guy?
Hi, I'm Gil Fulbright. The people that run my campaign, they've made this commercial, and I'm in it. This campaign, it's not about me. It's about crafting a version of me that'll appeal to you. A version that visits random work sites with paid actors pointing at things. A version of me that doesn't find old people loathsome or pointless. Has a conventionally attractive yet curiously still family. Listening to my constituents, legislating, these are things I don't do. What I do is spend about 70% of my time raising funds for re-election. I'd do anything to stay in office. My name's Gil Fulbright, but hell, I'll change my name to Phil Goldbright or Bill Fulbright or fill up my mouth with farts. These are the things that are important to me. And these are the fine people that finance my campaign. Now, in order to do these things, I have to stay in office. And to stay in office, I have to keep these guys happy. Now, if any of these things make these guys unhappy, well, my hands are tied. So come November, the choice is clear. Do you want another spineless mouthpiece for special interest and lobbyists, or a spineless mouthpiece for special interest and lobbyists? I'm Philip a Mouth with Farts, and I approve this message.
And that's what happened while we were away.
Oh, man. At Trump's MSG rally over the weekend, I saw Tucker Carlson went off about how unimpressive many of our wannabe betters actually are. And I got to tell you, I cannot amen that enough. I have worked full-time in politics for 18 years. And being a part of the Iowa caucuses through numerous cycles, you get a lot of the inside view and connections and networking through those presidential races with the national political habitat. And the list of people I've met, whether they were writing the checks, cashing the checks, getting the votes, running the campaigns to get the votes, the list of people I've met who I thought were impressive, regardless of their ideology, is way outratioed by the list of people I've been unimpressed by. I mean, that parody is not, it's not even parody. It's not even parody. Aaron's Montage brought to you by our friends over at Jace Medical. How much time do you spend thinking of worst case scenarios? Well, if you're prepared for them, the answer is you don't have to spend as much time, because we do know there are people, unfortunately, in some dark recesses thinking up worst case scenarios all the time. And we've seen several of them in recent years. All right. So this is why you want to go to our friends over at Chase Medical. What do you do if one of your children needs a certain medication but can't get it? There's a supply chain shortage, I should say. A weather emergency, like what is still going on. Somebody sent me a lovely note about do not forget about the people of Western North Carolina still struggling there. So you can't get to a pharmacy. There is something you can do to ensure that you and your loved ones have medication on hand when it's needed. It's a solution that thousands of people have already discovered, and we have been recommending the last couple of years on this show. It's called the Jace case. It'll allow you to start stocking up on medication now so that you are prepared for the next time that could never happen here, ends up happening here. It's a personalized emergency kit that contains essential antibiotics and medications that treat the most common and deadly bacterial infections. It provides 5 life-saving antibiotics for emergency use. You just fill out a simple form online. They'll have it in case you need it. And there's add-on options where you can customize it too, even for things like, say, ivermectin. All right, go to jace.com, enter the code DACE at checkout for a discount on your order. Jace.com, J-A-S-E, code DACE at discount for your order there. Code DACE for the discount for your order at jace.com. All right, to Aaron's montage we go. I want to start with Steve Bannon. And I don't know Steve Bannon at all. I don't. And within my network of people, opinions of him when I've asked have been decidedly mixed. I was a guest on his show while he was incarcerated when my buddy Congressman Chip Roy filled in as a guest host and had me on, and then they proceeded to edit me out of the show. Okay, so what I'm about to say doesn't have any regard, attachment to it, nothing. I have no reason to say this other than it's what I really think. But not giving the regime jack frickin' squat, even to the point of going to prison, and then being let out right as your guy Trump is surging in the polls, and you pop right on your podcast within hours of being released from a federal penitentiary. And you pop right on your podcast and just go full, I came to drop bombs. It's pretty freaking that's pretty freaking badass, man. Just got to say that, guys. Regardless of what you think of that dude and or his politics, if you're a dude, you would agree with me. And that is the kind of moxie that made America, not tampons in the boys' bathroom or struggle sessions. So I just wanted to note that as I get messages from people this morning saying, well, do you think if I live in a state where there's an amendment on the ballot and we could just murder and slaughter children? And I go to a church that claims to preach the Bible where God says he hates hands that shed innocent blood. Are you saying that if the church I go to doesn't do anything about that, I shouldn't go there? Because I really like it there. Meanwhile, Steve Bannon's walking out of a freaking prison cell. Okay? So before we moved on, men, I thought the dude code required an acknowledgement of this feat. Any thoughts on that before I move on?
That's like if Jeremiah Smith or Ryan, is it Williams at Alabama, just completely posterizes your favorite cornerback on your favorite team. You just got to tip the cap. You know, it's one of those types of things. It's like you like him, you hate him, but sometimes you just got to tip the cap.
Yeah, Donald Trump winning is not victory. It just gives us a chance at actually playing the game. And it's going to take that level of resolve to win it. So it's a good example to get this thing started.
All right, let's transition to what I think we now know is the October surprise here as we sit on the eve of the end of October. Tim Walz likes chicks? I mean, that's my initial reaction to that story. Wait a minute. Tim Walz likes chicks? I think that's the October surprise, guys. Thoughts?
Why not? Why not?
That is as shocking as anything else I've seen so far in the month of October. However, to be fair, they still made Sweet Love over George Michael. So the music was at least gay. All right. So maybe that's what helped him get through with a chick, is he was listening to George Michael. And but nevertheless, I mean, I've been bracing myself the entire month of October. What is the October surprise? We've been predicting assassination attempts and everything else. I got to tell you, I am completely blindsided and was not prepared for the news that Tim Walz likes chicks. I mean, I am.
Did you see he's on?
What in the name of Lindsey Graham is happening here?
He's apparently on Dan Le Batard's show, being pro porn, connecting with the dudes that way.
Well, didn't they put out some ad?
Yeah.
Some porn ad with some dude as well?
Yeah.
Okay.
They're actually going, you have a right.
Yeah,
this is what they're trying to take away from you.
They're closing. Here's their closing pitch, allegedly. Okay. We're going on day 3 of crying about some comedian 99.9% of people have never heard of.
Never heard the guy's name until he showed up at that rally on the weekend.
Walz
had no idea who he was.
Said tampons in boys' bathrooms in public schools is essential for learning. And we will defend your God-given right to self-pleasure yourself in the most debasing of ways, both to yourself and others. That's their closing pitch. Yeah. Oh, and here are some alleged. I didn't have time to make sure every single doctor on that stage was an actual abortionist. That's why I said alleged. We actually are promoting doctors who acknowledge somebody is having a medical emergency and nobody actually goes down to help said person.
They're the ones saying, is there a doctor in the house? Can someone do something about this?
See,
here's your sign.
Yeah. Look at how absurd all of this is, what we're talking about. This speaks to, Aaron, how you closed your montage with that faux politician. But the fact that is hovering over reality means that there's even at least as big a joke that's responsible for it. And that is we the people. They keep trying this stuff and doing this stuff and watching us die right in front of them because we've been a joke for a long time. Again, that is why I'm saying Bannon's resolve. And listen, Bannon is a guy, and he referred back to 2016. Listen, he had a front row seat to 2016, and that didn't go so well. We all have to up our game. There's no choice about that. If Trump gets in and we are just going to run in place again, I'll tell you what, I will have zero patience for that. That's all I'm going to say. You understand nothing. If you think you're a person of the right, you put Trump in office and you get to continue to live your life the same. It's not going to work that way.
And I'll say this again about Bannon, because I said this when his show edited me out. I don't care what him and his show think about me, us. I don't care. If they're going to do the kind of work they did on the jab,
for sure,
then that's all that really matters to me in the end. And anybody that will that knows me privately, as these guys do, will tell you I have an ego like any other red-blooded American male does, but it's just not driven by that kind of stuff. I just don't care. I don't. What I care about is if he's going to do important work. I don't care if they completely blacklist me, and I don't care. The work is more important, man. I'm a big believer in the plaque that Reagan had on his desk in the White House. It's amazing what you can get done when you don't care who gets the credit for it. I want to talk now about Ryan Gudersky on CNN last night, and I want to juxtapose that with Jeff Bezos' op-ed. And add a little personal context. I've not been on CNN since I was on via Sat-Up Lake on a panel with some dude who, before we even started having the conversation, and I don't even remember what the topic was, began referring to me as the American Taliban. And I'm like, this isn't even a constructive conversation. I'm not even giving an opinion yet. Never heard this guy's name in my life. I doubt he even knows who I am. So I just took out it was very clear they were not interested in having a constructive conversation. I got better things to do with my life. So I took off my earpiece and just walked off the set right there in the middle of the stand-up and haven't been back or invited back. But there's a clear double standard expressed there, okay, where it's perfectly fine to intimate on one end that those who disagree with you are Nazis. But to counter that, with the obvious connective demagoguery, and even by the way, pretexting it with, I wouldn't assume that. While the other guy starts with, well, if you don't want to be a Nazi, called a Nazi, don't act like one. That double standard there is when I talk about how we have moved in the last decade from bias to malfeasance. That is a great example of what I'm talking about. And then you have Bezos coming around saying, hey, we've got to hire more conservatives. We've got to be more or less biased. Number one, guys, how much are you buying that? I mean, I remember when they had me on the NewsHour on PBS the night after the election. And they said, hey, in 2016, hey, how'd we miss this? And I asked them, I mean, well, how many, you guys talk a lot about diversity in newsroom culture. How many people in this newsroom go to church on a at least monthly basis? How many of them are pro-life? How many of them are any kind of a Republican? So you've got diversity based on, you know, what we can see of people ethnically and racially and biologically, but what about ideologically? What we can't see. Haven't been back on that show either. So color me skeptical that Jeff Bezos is now going to be Elon Musk 2.0 and lead the great charge against corporate media institutional bias. But you know what? I'm commanded to love my neighbors. I love myself. I'm going to be skeptical. I'll give it a chance. But guys, I'm not really optimistic on that front. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I'm going to need to see a lot of it more before I start making any conclusions about where this is going. I do think that there is something to the Silicon Valley bros maybe trying to not cozy up to right-wingers, but maybe more of a
hands
reaction.
Up, don't shoot.
Yeah, something like that. I mean, obviously Elon Musk is the big one, and he is down the red pill rabbit hole about as much as anybody like him could go. I think when it comes to Mark Zuckerberg, the change in image that he has tried to display over the past year and going on years now, and trying to cozy up a little bit, I think, I don't know. I think there's something to that, but I'm going to need to see a lot more.
Todd?
I'm the same there. I was going to bring up the Zuckerberg example. You know, these guys have transformed their lives in various ways. And more than Zuckerberg, this guy is, you know, fundamentally about, you know, making money on some level, and a lot of it with Amazon. You know, those, it's just certain instincts like might be finally kicking in within the journalism front. The thing about this is here, don't just leave it all on. I'm seeing opening. Here's where conservatives have to do things differently. Are we just going to wait for David French to fill that void? Or how about as a bunch of conservatives approach him with the kind of names that are happy to get in the fray and do this kind of work? Listen, one of the big problems is people who are conservative haven't wanted to do certain kind of jobs for all kinds of reasons. They aren't racing to be part of journalism. And I'm not just talking about the editorial page once you're made somehow with a no, why aren't you being reporters? Why aren't you doing other things? We don't fill those voids. This is Steve's point about Hollywood. You really, at the end of the day, can you complain that you're just getting trash out of Hollywood if conservatives and Christians just don't go into that genre? We've got to start thinking differently in a lot of different ways. If people, this is the Washington Post. This thing can go national and start making a lot more money right away. It's honestly, it's possible and possible to happen quickly. But are we just going to wait for Bezos to do it? Bezos is going to get bored with that after a while. Everybody can put their best foot forward and say, hey, we got some ideas. Approach him right now. Real names, real money. Say, we want to be a part of this.
I have seen someone, let's say Jeff Bezos has a little Elon Musk in him, a little, and attempts to follow, for the sake of argument, and attempts to follow through on the stuff he is saying. I have seen firsthand, and you guys are going to remember this because it was just a few years ago. I have seen firsthand what happens when someone who is not a communist is anywhere from a centrist to just average to a conservative takes over a venerable corporate media outlet and attempts to deconstruct its bias. I've known a guy off and on for many years his name is James Heckman, and he has been involved in numerous publishing and media endeavors over the years, including Fox News. And James basically was one of the people integral in starting the Rivals and Scout and CBS Sports networks of college sports team sites in the early era of the internet and everything else. And his company, a few years ago, back in 2017, I think it was, they bought Sports Illustrated for a song when it had essentially lost its entire subscriber base with modernization. And there's a union for that a lot of these journalists belong to, and man, it's hard, like Warren Beatty and Reds left. And Heckman was not where the three of us would be politically, but certainly identified as more to the right than Jeff Bezos ever has been to this point. Maybe I would say Heckman was where Elon Musk kind of started out when he bought Twitter in 2022. And the instant reaction that this union had to having any form of fairness standards, to being asked to report on men and women's sports, not even to take the other position, but just to report on it fairly. You saw recently how the WNBA players went after Christine Brennan, who's the OG of feminist sports writing, and now she's not left enough for them, right? You and I were talking about that a few weeks ago, Todd.
Yeah.
This I saw happen at Sports Illustrated because I worked with James on this, and when they found out I was involved, they then tried to smear me as a racist and the company is racist and everything else. Now, I eventually got absolved, and I got a letter absolving me from Sports Illustrated corporate. And then I just resigned and said, you guys can stick it where the sun don't shine. I got other things going on in order to fight this on the battlefield of Sports Illustrated. But, that's a major corporate media legacy brand, not anywhere approaching the Washington Post, but certainly a very potent media brand in the American corporate media pantheon. And even trying to turn that into being anything other than just an open mouthpiece for brown shirts caused, 3 Mile Island. I can't even imagine what trying to do that to the Washington Post would do. And I also, therefore, guys, cannot imagine that you would be willing to do it at all unless you really believed in it to some degree. Otherwise, you're going to eventually cut your losses and say, given the vastness of my empire, this just isn't worth it.
Boy, it would be fun to try, though. If he just needs he needs to be shown the way. He needs to be shown that listen, here, I suggested to my old editor at the Des Moines Register more than 15 years ago, Rick Green. I went into his office, and to his credit, he said, I want you all to come up and how we can improve this paper specifically in journalism in general. And I said, get rid of editorial pages and have 3 products within the paper. You're going to have a regular newspaper down the middle, the kind of reporters who want to do that kind of work, and then you're going to have 2 news magazines within the same product. One is the right, one is the left. And on any given day, all 3 of them are going to be holding each other accountable by the stories they choose, how they cover them. There's any number of things and you can, entities like the Blaze and the Atlantic could be for 1-year contract. We'll be part of the Post. We'll be that right. We'll be that left. Sorry, Blaze, if I'm getting out front of myself, but you know what I'm talking about. There is a way. Do we want to do it or not? We have to.
Mm-hmm. Back with more here in a few. All right, Back here on the Steve Deace Show, brought to you by our friends over at Hillsdale. They are passing out the ultimate voter guide, and it's called a Pocket Constitution. You can get one today. They want to get 1 million of these in the pockets of Americans before they go to vote in a crucial election 1 week from now. And if you want a free copy of that, maybe you're like, I've already got one. Well, maybe you want to get one for someone you love, someone you know in your life who needs to read that. Just go to daceforhillsdale.com. My last name, F-O-R, the preposition, not the number. Daceforhillsdale.com is where you can go fill out a simple form there. They'll then get it in the mail to you. They'll ship it to you for free, and the Constitution is free itself because there's no better way to become familiar with the foundations of liberty and the founding principles of liberty in the country than reading America's founding documents. So go to daceforhillsdale.com. Again, that is daceforhillsdale.com. We want to welcome from the Center for Christian Virtue in Ohio, Aaron Baer. Good to have you back here on The Blaze, Aaron. How are you?
Hey, Steve. Always good to be with you, man. Doing really well.
Aaron, I cannot hear him. Sorry.
Gotcha. So Todd and I will have to carry this segment for just a little bit. Todd, can you talk for just a little bit?
Aaron, how you doing? This is Todd Erzen with the Steve Deace Show.
Audio from back there.
Well,
Aaron,
Todd, can you hear me?
Aaron can hear us, so Todd, you can interview Aaron.
All right, I'll keep going and everybody else can. Aaron, well, why don't we let you do most of the talking right out of the gate? Tell us a little bit about yourself. Remind the audience who you are.
Sure, yeah. So I run Center for Christian Virtue here. We're actually the Family Policy Council in Ohio, much like Bob Vanderplot's in the Family Leader there with you in Iowa. We do very similar work, and what we say, we advocate for public policy that reflects the truth of the gospel. So we do a lot of work at the Ohio State House, but then all over the state, and we've taken on a few national fights now as well, with us showing down with Nationwide Insurance for some of their woke political activism.
Well, Bob Vanderplot's here, knows a little bit about being at Ground Zero, this being Iowa, but you've had certainly some Ground Zero experiences yourself, certainly with the Ohio abortion referendum that happened not too long ago. The Republican candidate for Vice President of the United States is J.D. Vance. So tell me a little bit about the last year as you've been involved in politics at a very hyped up federal level, and then follow up by telling us where you think things stand within the next week before Election Day.
Yeah, it's really been a season like none other in Ohio. First and foremost, we were sort of the epicenter of the abortion debate. We had $60 million from out of the state pour into Ohio to pass this abortion on demand up until birth constitutional amendment. And we really saw the left sort of political playbook all roll out here. I have to say through that, even though it was a really awful loss that we experienced here in Ohio, you did see certain leaders step up, people like J.D. Vance in particular, that really lended his voice. Even though we knew it was going to be an uphill battle, we knew we were going to be facing off against the media and all of the left machine. It was really encouraging to see J.D. step up and help lead the fight here against that deadly abortion amendment. And we've got a long way to go to repeal that. But then, coming out of that, we were going into this presidential election cycle. We're not only, well before we knew J.D. Vance was going to be the vice president nominee, we had a big Senate race here. This is one of the few states that Trump had won in 16 and 20 that was held by a Democratic senator in Sherrod Brown, who's one of the most radical leftist senators. I saw something today that called him the third California senator. And so, going from all the epicenter of the abortion debate to then J.D. Vance being picked and Bernie Moreno taking on Sherrod Brown, it's just sort of been a never-ending political cycle here in Ohio.
On the abortion front, there's a lot of concern about how these referendums are going to shake out. Were no lessons learned from what happened in Ohio? I mean, how have other states connected dots, or are there too many people on the right making their peace with something that, quite frankly, it's unacceptable to make peace with?
Yeah, I think there have been some lessons learned. I think you look at states like Florida. Now, thankfully for Florida, they already had the 60% threshold in place to amend their state constitution. That was one of the big flaws in our state constitution, is that it only takes 50% plus one to amend our state's founding document, which is why, the U.S. Constitution is about 7,000 words. The Ohio Constitution is about 70,000 words. because special interests know if they have enough money, they can change our constitution. Well, Florida is in a much better place because they have the 60% threshold. You also look at states like Nebraska, that I think has a real opportunity of beating that constitutional amendment coming their way. They're actually running a competing ballot initiative. So you see different strategies being deployed in different states across the country. I think at the end of the day, though, we have to just realize we are at a massive financial disadvantage. And we live in a culture that abortion has so saturated the skin. We did an exit poll in Ohio afterwards to find out how people voted and found that 1 out of 3 weekly attending churchgoers voted yes on this deadly abortion amendment, right? So there are just some things culturally that we really have to do to deal with. Now, I will say I feel a lot more positive about pro-life candidates going forward, but on these constitutional amendments where it's all abortion or no abortion, we're in a really dark place culturally right now.
Well, I appreciate the frankness of that statement. I mean, you can't change things going forward unless you're absolutely honest with it, and that's chilling. 1 in 3, that's just a problem, pastors. Let's specifically J.D. Vance. He was no shrinking violet beforehand. He was on TV a lot. He's not afraid of being opinionated. I mean, he wrote a book. It was made into a movie. But, people are so busy with all kinds of things. They're really getting a sense of who he is now. Are you surprised at all by what you are seeing? Is this exactly who you thought the nation would get? Tell us a little bit more about how you know J.D. Vance personally.
Yeah, no, I got to say, America's finally getting to see the J.D. Vance we know in Ohio. I thought that vice presidential debate was phenomenal. I got to say, Steve had that great tweet thread about, or X thread, whatever it's called now, about how the Joe Rogan and President Trump interview was one of maybe the most important interview of our lifetime since the Nixon JFK debate. I think in many ways, too, go listen to some of the long-form interviews J.D. Vance has done. Actually, go listen to the Theo Vaughn J.D. Vance one. Now, there's some language in there. Apologize for that. But you actually see a Christian explaining our worldview, engaging and connecting with people who don't necessarily share our perspective on Jesus Christ, but engaging on that personal level in a way that I've just never seen before. By all means, I think that we're in really good position going into this election. But long term, if J.D. Vance, who is a strong man of faith, who is pro-life, if he is the face of sort of the conservative movement going forward, I think we're in really strong position because he gets some things. I mean, again, even not just about things like abortion and family, but also about corporate America. As one of my good friends here in the agricultural business has talked about, that corporate America and the government in many ways are one and the same today. And so we need to be ready to wage war against those corporate forces when necessary.
Speaking of getting things, that's a really important point because I know here in Iowa, Bob has supported other candidates besides Trump. Our show has supported other candidates besides Donald Trump. And it's been quite a figuring out phase the last 8 years. Steve had a great monologue yesterday about, this is this is the battle, and he does things differently, but he's not than we would, but he's not against us either. And I think we just have to wrap our brain around that fact, learn the lessons of the last 8 years. Some things we can forgive and forget. Other things we're just going to have to keep working as hard as we can. What lessons have you learned along those lines, along the last 8 years, about how you're going to do your work, your agency is going to do your work, maybe a little bit differently? It doesn't mean you're changing your principles, but perhaps your tactics. What do we need to do going forward?
Well, I think first and foremost, we need to recognize what the Kamala Harris administration would do and the full weaponizing of the administrative state against, honestly, against Christians, but really against our kids, right? I love Katie Faust and her organization, Them Before Us, that talks about how culture has just sort of been flipped on its head, where we put the desires of adults over the needs of kids. And when you look at all of the things the Biden administration and Harris administration have done to weaponize the federal government against children, it is really unbelievable. Again, I always think back to the Department of Agriculture sending letters to every public school in the country and saying, if you don't allow boys in girls' bathrooms and men in girls' sports, we will deny you access to the free and reduced lunch program. We're not going to give poor kids food if you don't allow boys in girls' bathrooms, right? I mean, so the Trump administration just coming in and stopping that on its face is a massive net gain. I think one of the things that J.D. Vance has also really leaned into is when you look at what's actually happening in the southern border. Actually, right now I'm in Miamisburg, Ohio. I'm at the Bridge Church over here, right by Middletown, Ohio, where J.D. Vance is from. When you look at what that open border has done to these communities to destroy lives, 70,000 American lives lost to fentanyl, you understand that these two are issues of the dignity of life. And so, again, when there really is when you step back and look at the policies that these administrations are going to do, even if Donald Trump certainly isn't where we want him on things like abortion, certainly isn't there where we want him on things like marriage. And let me remind you, J.D. Vance actually did vote against the redefinition of marriage bill. We still have a lot of things that the Trump administration would at least stop that the Harris admin has pushed forward.
We talk a lot about on the show that some of our frustrations with people on the right, they have to fall back. We have to apply them equally with us in terms of our failures. That 1 in 3 statistic that you mentioned on one particular issue, I'd imagine you'd get that on any number of issues, and how people tend to vote for an increasingly crazy Democrat Party. What do we just need to be way more frank about with our own tribe, the church, before we worry about anybody else and criticizing them? What is inexcusable going forward?
Well, I think a few things. First and foremost, the way we've shrunk back from culture, the way we've not discipled our own kids. I think what the biggest thing that we need to be frank about right now is public education. And this is the thing that gets me in hot water maybe more than any, but you need to get your kids out of public schools. If there's one thing I always say, public schools have failed at literacy and education. You look at the National Assessment of Education Progress, you find upwards of 2/3 of fourth graders aren't literate or good at math. But what they're really good at is indoctrinating our kids. And you see that when you see that 80% of people under the age of 29 voted yes on this abortion amendment, 70% of those 30 to 45 voted yes on that. That's the public schools actually working the way they were designed. They're designed to make functional critical theorists throughout America. And so unless we're taking on that public education system and rebuilding a new education system through school choice programs like your governor in Iowa has done, like we've done here in Ohio, like Ron DeSantis has done, we're not serious about saving the country long term.
Of course, we totally agree with you, and we just have a couple minutes left. But I know that as obvious as everything you just said, walking in to your average church that is undeniably conservative, those are fighting words, because this is my school and my school's fine and everything's great and I like the PTA and I like the sports teams and anything. And we have all kinds of shiny idols on the right that we will not smash. That's fundamentally a problem. Do you have any secrets for how we might smash some of them?
Really where we found some success here in Ohio is we've talked about the literacy crisis, right? I mean, you look at the literacy numbers in America today and they are god awful. God help us. They're so terrible. And so what we've actually done is we started going to churches and say, hey, you know what? You need to get into this game and start a school in your empty Sunday school classrooms. We've actually started 2 schools in churches. We're going to start about 10 next year. And this is where we've really connected with them. And hey, you want to give the kids in your community a hope and a future, and also not have them be sterilized for life by transgender medicine. Then get into this education game. I think over the last few years, we're seeing a little great awakening happening there. We've gone from 16% of the kids out of the public schools in Ohio to 20% of the kids out of the public schools. We don't want to make that 50%. But really, unless somebody starts planting the flag there, it's not going to happen. And I think the more and more Christians are bold to speak out, and we always say pastors are willing to do it, but at least the laity are willing to do it, the more and more we're going to see progress going our way.
Amen. We've got 1 minute to make your last pitch to the American voter on what they should do 1 week from today. Go.
Well, I got to tell you, so Steve and I first connected on this because of a campaign we just rolled out called Nationwide's Not On Your Side. And I really wanted to talk to you guys in particular because you're in Iowa and Nationwide Insurance has headquarters in Iowa and Ohio. And this is one of those woke companies that has been driving a woke agenda, sponsoring pride parades, sponsoring organizations that host drag queen story hours, supporting legislation that requires men and women's restrooms. And so we've been calling on people, much like you've seen all of these other companies like Caterpillar and John Deere and Harley Davidson Davidson back out of the corporate equality index, back out of their crazy DEI policies. We need people to put that pressure on Nationwide Insurance. Tweet at Nationwide. Riley Gaines has tweeted about this. Libs of TikTok has tweeted about this. We need to get Nationwide out of the sort of, and all these other corporations out of woke politics, and just focus on, serving their customers and making money. So that's the big thing that we wanted to talk about, is go to nationwidenotyourside.com and find out about what Nationwide is doing, and call your insurance broker and say, hey, listen, I want to get insurance from you. I don't want to have you pushing for men in women's bathrooms. And when we start separating corporate America from government again, and just get them back, corporate America back to business, we're going to be in a much better place strategically in America today.
Amen. America, take your country back from government, from big corp, all of it. It's yours. Yeah. But you have to stand a post. Andrew, you've been fantastic. Thank you very much. God bless.
Hey, thanks for having me, guys.
Well, hats off to you, Todd, for handling that interview on the fly. Wonderful, wonderful job. And I think the lesson, particularly going off the last comment from Aaron Baer there about this pressure campaign on Nationwide, we've actually seen this work multiple times with multiple corporations over the last few years in ways that I didn't think was going to be possible maybe 4 or 5 years ago. I just didn't think that we necessarily had the clout. But you look, starting with Bud Light, and that was maybe blunted in a way at the very end with the adoption of UFC and things like that, in a way that I would have not, I would have rather not have that go that direction. It still was very, very successful. They felt the pain loud and clear. You look at Target, they decided not to do their pride displays to the great degree that they did. All of the companies, Tractor Supply, John Deere, and others that Robbie Starbuck has put the pressure campaign, these things are actually working. I would submit to you, though, that it's only really going to change America in the opposite direction. When, yeah, they can change their policies, they can issue tepid responses, which we've seen them do, and that's a good thing. At the very least, that's a better thing than just out-and-out endorsement of neo-Marxist or outright Marxist causes. I think the very next step that we need to see some of these companies take is not only to issue tepid, we're not going to do this anymore, is to actually apologize, to grovel, and then start funding our causes again. I think that's the next place that these types of pressure campaigns need to go. And I would add as well, when he's talking about education reform, school, if you're in a state like Iowa where we have school choice, and other states around the country, what he's talking about, getting schools started in churches, you really have zero excuse, especially in places like this and others that have school choice. So wonderful conversation. Hats off to you, Todd, for jumping in there at the last minute. We'll be back with Hour 2. Steve makes his election predictions next.
All right, back here with Hour 2, live and on demand on Blaze TV, radio, and podcast. I want to thank Todd and Aaron, particularly Todd, for pinch hitting there when we had some technological difficulties with Aaron Baer from the Center for Christian Virtue there in Ohio. You can let us know what you think about what we think via the stevedeace.com inbox. Do that by emailing us, steve@stevedeace.com, DEACE. Like us on Facebook, me, we, and Gab. You can follow me at Steve Deace Show on X, formerly known as Twitter, Instagram, TikTok. And then also don't forget to subscribe to our brand new YouTube channel at Deace Show on YouTube. Again, that's at Deace Show on YouTube. And then finally, if you are a podcast listener, thank you. You can subscribe too. Hit subscribe or follow if you're on iTunes on your podcast platform of preference. And then make sure to also, if you like the show, hit us up with a 5-star review. Those are things that help the show to continue to grow, and we appreciate each and every one of those. So thank you. Also want to tell you about a new America First beef company. Their name is Farmer Bill's, and what they're selling isn't just beef, it's beef biltong. That's conventional beef jerky that we often get. That stuff can be loaded with sugar, soys, nitrates, and fillers. However, biltong is an air-dried delicacy that America is just now discovering. It's a cured meat snack without the sugar, the soy, the nitrates, and fillers. Farmer Bill's is an America First company with an America First supply. tight chain, and they source their beef and bison from the grasslands of South Dakota and support American ranchers. They sell pre-sliced biltong as well as charcuterie slabs as well. And the slabs are like a massive dry aged ribeye with marbled fat and the perfect amount of spices and salts. We've all tried the biltong. We all absolutely loved it. And right now, you can get their best seller bundle. That's all 4 flavors. That's original beef, spicy chili beef. That's the one I like. Original bison, spicy chili bison. You can get that best seller bundle with all 4 of those flavors when you use the code Steve for 10% off your order right now. That's the best seller bundle. It ships for free. Use the code Steve for 10% off today at farmerbillsprovisions.com. Double plural there. farmerbillsprovisions.com. Code Steve for 10% off at farmerbillsprovisions.com. All right, guys. I wasn't going to do it this election, but the call came down from HQ that a personal request was made by the patriarch around here, Mr. Glenn Beck, that I had to turn in an election map. I had to do it. So I bit the bullet, did the best research I could, the most, I checked my gut. I felt the vibes. As Todd is saying, we're going to just have vibes elections moving forward. Okay. And before I get to these predictions, I'm putting myself up here as a potential tool of scorn and mockery, but this time on purpose. I mean, let's face it, a lot of times I just kind of step into that. Okay. So this time I'm putting myself up as a tool of scorn and mockery on purpose. I'm making an offering here this Halloween season. And I'm going to make myself the subject of fake news or not. We're going old school. We're bringing back the fake news or not. And I'm putting myself in the crosshairs. I'm the guy now on the slab here in the pit and the pendulum. Okay. And Todd and Aaron are just sitting there deciding thumb up, thumb down, how low that pendulum's going to get, how much closer to my neck it's going to swing. All right. Before I get there, though, and lay out my predictions and why, and then let Todd and Aaron rightly ridicule me for them, I want to give you guys a couple of, big picture thoughts about where things are trending here in the final week to go. So a couple of things that I want to note here for you. I right now am encouraged by 2 things. Let's take these one at a time. And remember, I told you guys before, be very restrained about drawing conclusions about early voting and mail-in voting data in comparison to 2020. We have no idea whether 2020 was a harbinger. I don't believe it was. I'm pretty confident it was an outlier, given much of the country was still shut down. Okay. But we won't know for sure until this election is completed. And so you have to look at these things without using 2020 as your comparative metric. So with that being said, here's a couple of things that I am encouraged by right now, gentlemen. Number 1, I think at the very least, the aggressive response by Republicans nationwide indicates that the GOP voting base is significantly more active and engaged than it was during the last 2 years of special and off-year elections, when we were one of the few sounding the alarm as Democrats were overperforming by an average of 9 points during that special election off-year 2-year cycle. And that's normally an omen for what happens when we mass vote in the next election cycle. And Democrats systemically dominated during this period. So even if this is, well, Steve, we're largely cannibalizing our own vote. Could be the case. Could be. But even if that is the case, it is still overall a net positive that the energy level is higher than at any point we have seen it since the 2022 midterms gave us all PTSD. You guys have any thoughts on that before I move on to point 2?
This is what I've been trying to articulate, put in better words, I think, that at the very least there is energy there, because and it's understandable, in the aftermath of 2020, we all heard it either from people we knew or we saw online, kind of the shrug, throw your hands up in the air, why vote at all? They're just going to steal it again. That sentiment was real, and it was spectacular. Now, there is some double-mindedness here, but I'm glad people are actually invested again, because I think that's what the early voting at the very least shows you. They're engaged and invested again.
Well, when it comes to the GOP base, does this analysis mean the statistics that we've talked about Christians staying home are much ado about nothing, or are they in fact staying home and there's other parties within the traditional GOP base that are overcompensating for that loss, if there is in fact a net gain? Which one of those two things are true, or more likely to be true?
We don't know, and we won't know until we see more of the overall electorate. But to your point or your question, I can say this as I get to my second point. I have seen detailed early voter return data now from 2 battleground states that Trump lost in 2020. And I can't tell you the states, but I can tell you they are 2 states that would have a high propensity of Christian voters. Okay. In both cases, the overall electorate, by the way, was overwhelmingly female, +10, +11. When I say overwhelmingly female, that's about double what the general election typically is on average since 1980. And yet Republicans were still performing very strong. Now, we don't know how the actual people voted. I didn't get to see ballots. Obviously, they haven't even started counting them. But just the demographics of those doing the returns. Nevertheless, assuming most Republicans voted Republican, and on average, 88 to 95% of them will. If the GOP is performing that well in battlegrounds with +10 female samples, how will Republicans perform on Election Day itself when more of the men show up? So, Todd, I'll go to you first on this point.
Well, this is complicated. I'm not sure what it means going forward long term. There's this interesting thing with I think a lot of this may have to do with girls' sports, men and women's spaces kind of thing, which we on our side, me and the show, I am a father of daughters, but ultimately this is arguing just about the nature of reality. Whereas a lot of the women that may be coming forward, they have far more of a feminist tilt about all of this, and then may go vote on abortion referendums and other things differently. So I think you're right about this is a good thing in terms of this is election. I don't have any idea what it means going forward, which is why I've been so insistent about got to figure this kind of things out. If there is a Trump win, what did this victory really mean for whom and for now and for later?
Yeah, and it's going to be, we might have to brace ourselves for a chaotic, in terms of if Donald Trump wins, or really regardless of the outcome, a chaotic path to victory, like how this election was won, because of all of the variables that we've kind of had to, some of which we've had to cherry pick, some of which we've had to throw out. I mean, I kind of have, I've teased this before, I'm kind of working on my own hypothesis, but we don't even know when exits come how reliable and how truthful they'll actually be as well. So generally, I agree with your analysis on the second point there, Steve. But when we look back at this election, I think it might be kind of a chaotic picture of how this one was won either way.
Before we get to my actual predictions, a couple of developments that have occurred today and how they may or may not impact the result on Tuesday and what I'm about to share with the audience. Number one, J.D. Vance is going to be doing an interview with Joe Rogan now, a full sit-down interview down there in Austin for the Joe Rogan Experience. Joe Rogan came out today and said that Kamala Harris, as people want to do, have offered him an hour with her on Election Day, but he has to travel to her. And he basically said, hey, we do these things in Austin, and it's a full experience. It's what we do. And, you know, I want to make it work, but that's not going to work. I mean, essentially, it would make Rogan look really bad if he bent over backwards and gave Kamala, accommodations that weren't offered to Trump. To me, this is an offer by Kamala's people to say they gave him something, couldn't make it work at the last minute to try and save face. But you guys' thoughts on those two developments that have occurred here just in like the last hour or so?
My reading this, there was a similar offer. My understanding is there was a similar offer made from the Kamala campaign for this week as well. My first read at this was they're going to try to say it's unfair. We were mistreated. We weren't given the same opportunity. Blah 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 blah. It's just kind of a way to. It's a CYA. That's my reading of this.
Mm-hmm. I agree with that. Todd, what do you think?
This is a win for Kamala in that it's just avoiding a colossal loss. And this is she couldn't go there. There's no way she could go there. And now she's just saying, shucks, just couldn't quite work it out. This is, she had to avoid this at all costs without having it be a cloud of cowardice on her. We in this room know it is, but everybody's going to move on, and a lot of people won't even know that she ever had a chance to go on, and that's the way she wants it. It would have been a total disaster.
All right, let's get to my predictions, and this is what I believe the Electoral College will look like election night or at the end of election festival, etc. At the top, I have Trump with 297 Electoral College votes, Kamala with 241. I believe that Trump is going to sweep the Sun Belt, and I think for the first time since 1988, the Rust Belt, the big three Rust Belt states, Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania, will not all vote en masse. And it's funny when I told Todd and Aaron last week that I received an official papal request from Glenn to do this. So I was going to bite the bullet and do what I said all cycle I wasn't going to do, make predictions. Okay. When I agreed based on Glenn's appeal to heaven to get me to do this, I had already determined I'm going to take a state that I think Trump could or will win and just take it off the board. I got to give something to Grant their ballot harvesting scheme, I guess we'll call it. And then, of course, Todd, what was your advice before you even saw these picks? Your advice to me before you even knew I was going to do that was to do precisely that, to have some form of handicap built in, acknowledging what they have there, right? And if you're a Gretchen Whitmer, you didn't want to be on Kamala's ticket, you turn that down. And if you're going to salvage some kind of narrative coming out of election night, hey, you did your job. You held up your end of the bargain. You ran the system, and you denied Trump the state of Michigan. And I go back to our very own Sarah Gonzalez's documentary about voter fraud in the state of Michigan earlier this year that had us cutting ourselves. So that is the state that I'm giving them as an acknowledgement of their ability to procure, we'll call it that, to procure votes. So before I go on, questions, comments, or insults on my final Electoral College prediction map.
What's more likely, Pennsylvania goes blue or Virginia goes red?
I would ask me that again after the Supreme Court rules. The Supreme Court is fast-tracking the Virginia case on non-citizens on the voter rolls. So, in fact, I think I saw the Supreme Court has asked for the arguments of those who want those people put back on the voter rolls, has demanded they turn them in by 3:00 today. Okay, so let's see what, if anything, the Supreme Court does on that, and then maybe ask me that question again, or am I wimping out?
No, that's all right.
Okay. I also saw it reported earlier today that the Harris Walz campaign has canceled about a $4 million ad buy in the state of North Carolina here in the final week as well. So you would do something like that if you thought you had to divert resources to Virginia. I believe Trump he did. Trump has announced he's doing a rally in Virginia here in the last week. The early voting that I have seen public so this is what's publicly been presented. What I've seen out of two battleground states is is more than the surface level public data. Okay. But the public stuff I've seen from Minnesota and Virginia, if I were the Democrats, I would be concerned about those two states.
So I have a question. Naturally, we're asking questions here. looking at this map,
condemnation is totally a fair game too, guys. Okay.
From what I've seen, there's I think you've maybe invoked his name, John Ralston, out in Nevada. He's been sounding the alarm bells. I mean, the early voting margins, as opposed to you can go back to 2016 as well, but the early voting margins in Nevada are really, really positive. Arizona, outside of Maricopa County, you got to feel good if you're Trump. But if you've got those and you've got North Carolina, if you're the Trump campaign, Virginia would be nice to kind of have a feather in your cap. It's trending that direction, we think, nationally. But if you're the Trump campaign, you don't need Pennsylvania if you have those other states. You don't need Michigan, right, if you have those other states.
You mean if you have Virginia?
If you have North Carolina, Nevada, Georgia, Arizona, correct? 297 minus 19 is what? 270, 278, 277?
Well, that's assuming you're still going to win Wisconsin then.
Well, that's my question. Why wouldn't you live in Wisconsin?
Go all in on Wisconsin?
Why would you live in Wisconsin the final week?
That's a good point. And I can see this one both ways, which is also to give yourself, you and I know our sports betting terms, give yourself as many outs as possible, right? Let me ask you, one sports book gives you by far the best number on a game you feel real strongly about. Okay. But wants to limit what you can wager. On the other hand, you may not necessarily get the best number, but you have other books that'll not limit what you can wager, and the juice isn't as bad. So would some handicappers say take the best number no matter what? Yep. Would some handicappers that are really good at this say get as many outs as you can possibly get? And if you feel that strongly, you want the best limit you can get to win the most money. Yeah. So it's a viable question to ask. And I think you could look at it the other way too, which is you give yourself as many outs as possible. You make them spend some money in New Mexico. You make them spend some time in Virginia so that they can't do the exact same thing either. But it's a good question. Yeah.
I just go back to this. I've harped on this a few times. Of those three Rust Belt states, Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin by far had the slimmest margin in 2020. Therefore, it would lend you to thinking, it might be the easiest to flip. But I know you'll bring this up. The voter rolls are all over the place in that state. But still, I think you gotta. Hillary Clinton didn't go to Wisconsin in the final week. That's kind of a meme now. That's not the whole story.
Right.
But, you gotta. I think if you're the Trump campaign, you gotta divert some serious time in the final week to Wisconsin.
This map is obviously an optimistic one relative to possibilities we thought existed not very long ago. So what I can't tell is if you have calculated in a margin of cheating that you now think is just a fairly large one to overcome, or if you just decided, I can't possibly know what it is. Perhaps this thing, they think it's already in the book. I'm just going to tell you what I think is what would happen if there was no cheating, and then we'll see what happens. Which one of those two is this?
It's more the latter, but I had to account for the MOC nevertheless. And so Michigan is basically my one state embodiment of not knowing what an MOC is, which how many times have I said over the last 2 years? Gretchen Whitmer was up by 1 point in the Real Clear Politics polling average on Election Day, and she won by 10 points. I have no idea what the MOC in the state of Michigan is. No one could possibly know. But it's somewhat mitigated nationally by the fact that Trump is polling ahead of where he has ever polled. And as I've been saying for weeks, I don't think it has anything to do with some concern about credibility. All right. We're watching members of the Washington Post resign their jobs because the paper didn't endorse Kamala Harris. I don't think they care about their credibility at all. So I still believe Trump will overperform his polling. May not be by the margins we saw in 2020, where he was overperforming in states by 6, 7, 8 points. But I think he will still do better than his polling. We have had one consistent dynamic. And now we've had 3 Trump presidential elections, and in the first 2, there was a consistent dynamic. Donald Trump on Election Day overperformed his public polling. So I need to see that not be the case now, to not factor that in. And to me, I have to factor that in like I have to factor in a margin of cheating being expanded as well.
Speaking of that,
I'm trying to figure out how to factor both of them in at the same time.
I should have put this in the montage. I saw this over the weekend. I for whatever reason, didn't flag it, but somebody just sent this to us. The Nevada Supreme Court, did you see this story?
I saw this like late yesterday.
Ruled that the state can count mailed ballots that arrive without a postmark up to 3 days after Election Day.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I did see that.
See, everything we are talking, all of the main variables are in place, and especially the one you just said about him appearing to poll well. For if the steal is absolutely in, like they're going for it, and there's no margin of cheating too big because they ultimately want civil war, so they can enforce a level of boot to throat that they couldn't have before, and this was something that's going to make January 6th look like tiddlywinks. All those factors are in place. You'd want Trump to have that level of polling. You'd want Kamala to look this week. That's I can't.
I'll just tell you guys, I was talking about, go ahead, Aaron, I'm sorry.
Well, here's the path to I think this is probably, at least, if it's not plan A, it's at least plan A, B, plan 1A, 1B. This is akin, there's like 44 seconds left on the play clock at the end of the game. Okay, so it's not, you can't just take a knee right away. You got to kind of go back and do the shuffle back. That's kind of their sleazy path to victory, isn't it? Just concede the Sun Belt states and just kind of take that long extended knee, wait for the linemen to get to you in those 3 Rust Belt states, or Nevada, as we just said.
Where you've got longer term infrastructure as a party if you're a Democrat than you do the Sun Belt states. And along those lines, I'll tell you, I was talking about this, I was sharing this with our buddy and friend and colleague Daniel Horowitz before we did our show this morning. And I'll tell you where Daniel is at is exactly where your question is. Daniel is at, I am at Trump getting to 268. I need to see us break what they have managed to do in these Rust Belt states in the last 2 cycles. I need to see it. So I don't fault anybody for that at all. I can't. I mean, I might have been the first guy on a national platform in America screaming about voting irregularities on election night 2020. How could I possibly doubt that? That premise, I can't do it. All right, anything else before we show the Senate map?
How shocked are you on a scale of 1 to 10 that this is where you ended up on this state?
On Michigan or on the map, you mean?
On the map.
In the last 2 weeks, not shocked at all. 6 weeks ago, pretty shocked. And it just appears, especially, you know what, coming out of that presidential debate in September, I would have said no way. I mean, I was fairly convinced we were toast. That was not a good performance. And we allowed the seed to germinate in the American mind that she could be president of the United States. But what happened coming out of that is clearly there's been a trajectory alteration based on the more people see of Kamala Harris, the less they want to vote for her. And she doesn't have enough of a personality to make it about that and not about the future direction of the country right now, where only 22% are telling Gallup that they think we're on the right track. And I would not have foreseen that coming out of the debate. I thought our goose was cooked coming out of the debate. That's why I was so maudlin that night on the set. All right, let's get to the Senate map, where the Senate polling has definitely improved as well. And I'm going to say that Republicans, I think, end up with a minimum of 52. I think that that Trump will have that an upset. One of the either Arizona or Wisconsin, I believe, will be the upset of the night for Republicans. And since the Wisconsin Republican candidate doesn't have as much baggage as Carrie Lake does, I'll choose that one. But I think Republicans are going to flip one of those races. And then, so I think McCormick is going to win in Pennsylvania. I think if Trump wins, McCormick wins in Pennsylvania. And I think that Trump is going to win by enough of a margin, and Bernie Moreno has run a good enough campaign that I think he's going to beat Sherrod Brown. So I have Republicans finishing with 54 U.S. senators in their first Senate without Mitch McConnell as Senate leader. who tripped heading up to the stage to announce his retirement yesterday in a movement in only chef's kiss level of on brand. All right, questions, comments, or insults?
The only question I have out of all that is, will there be any Senate leadership fight that actually matters?
That's going to be up to Trump. If Trump does not put his thumb on here's where the Republican Party is nationally, guys. And we said this when he was president. If Trump doesn't make it happen, nothing good nationally is happening. Nothing. And everything good nationally that happens, he makes happen. So it's a lot to put on one dude, particularly one with the, who's as mercurial and erratic as Trump can be. But that's sadly where we are. And so if Trump decides it's got to at least be somebody like Rick Scott, it'll be Rick Scott. If Trump decides he doesn't want to expend any political capital on that at all, then it's going to be a younger and even dumber, but way dumber and less politically savvy version of McConnell, like John Thune or John Cornyn. It'll be up to Trump.
Quick note: the Mitch McConnell thing yesterday was really weird. He announced his retirement back earlier this year, and then the tripping and fall video was from 10 years ago.
Oh, was it really? I was wrong on that. Okay,
it was really weird how he was out, and it was odd. But it'll be fascinating. I think this is not breaking news. I mean, I think it's a pretty comfortable analysis to say that Republicans will have the majority. I mean, you've got Bob Casey going down in Pennsylvania as well. Mm-hmm. So it'll be interesting to see if Donald Trump wins, whether or not he just says, y'all can have your little party over here. I'm going to be the one calling the shots at the end of the day. It'll be interesting to see how he handles that dynamic, because I could just see him saying, go ahead, do your Thune, do your Cornyn, whatever you want to get. But at the end of the day, any legislation that you want actually signed into law, you've got to consult me with it. So I think I could see him handling it that way. I would love it for him to actually get involved in the fight. But based on kind of what we talked about yesterday with RFK Jr. talking about the privately funded transition team, I could see just Donald Trump saying the executive branch is now completely and wholly my fiefdom. You got to come through me if you want to do anything. So screw whoever you pick anyway.
I think a lot of things are possible here. A lot. I think it's way more possible than I would have said a few months ago that Mike Johnson will survive as speaker, specifically because he is so pliable that Trump can just move him any way that he wants. And I really don't mind Mike Johnson as speaker if Trump is moving him around. But having him as the fulcrum of opposition when we're in the minority, no. But if he just wants to be an order taker for Trump, I'm totally okay with that. But he's going to have to exercise some level of political capital in the Senate if he doesn't move for a leadership change there outside of the McConnell tent. He'll have to fight that then with whoever McConnell's replacement is for the next 4 years. All right, we'll come back. It'll be Pop Culture Tuesday here in a moment. Stay tuned. Back here on the Steve Deace Show, we're brought to you by our friends over at My Patriot Supply. If you're concerned that things are heading in the wrong direction, maybe what happened and is still going on in Western North Carolina was kind of your breaking point. That was mine. I mean, that's when I got on the horn to our friends at My Patriot Supply and said, okay, man, I'm in. I'm going full prepper. You got to hook me up. So I got the water filtration system. I got the 4-week emergency food kit from My Patriot Supply, 2,000 plus calories per day, breakfast, lunch, dinner, even drinks and snacks. So that can never happen here. I'm ready for when that happens here this time. All right. So when the day comes now, you need to be ready as well. Get your 3-month emergency food kit from My Patriot Supply. Ships fast and free. Ships fast and free. Get it right now at preparewithdace.com. Head over there right now to preparewithdace.com. Once again, that is preparewithdace.com. All right, before we get to Pop Culture Tuesday, any other thoughts, you guys, any dangling participles out there you want to address with my 2024 election predictions? Any other, shots you want to take? Kick me when I'm down.
What are you going to wear?
It won't be red. I'm not doing that again. Not Not doing that again. No, it won't be red. Probably some combination of blue and black. Blue shirt, black sport coat, blue sport coat, black shirt, something like that. Won't be red. Nope, won't be red.
Todd, you got anything?
And what he's going to wear? No.
You have nothing, though, of substance on.
Well,
I'm laying my heart out there, man. I'm exposed here. Okay,
well,
and not in a Tim Walz, Lindsey Graham kind of way.
How much more? Put a number on it. How much more are you exposed on this one? Then, I mean, you love doing this kind of stuff. You're just to the point of irrationality, quite frankly. But like, how much more exposed are you on this one? Do you think than in the average of the last, however?
In fairness, my record on these things over the years until recently has actually been really good. Okay. And I was pretty right about 2020. I mean, I called out the polling methodology, remember that entire cycle, and said there's no way the stuff they're polling will happen the way that their polls are claiming. And that is what we saw. All right. 2022, though, was a massive miss on my part, because I thought the normie votes we got in 94, in 2010, and in 2014 that we would get without Trump on the ballot. And now no more mean tweets or anything of that nature. And we didn't get it. Our people did show up, but we didn't get that normie vote that takes you from a meh to anywhere from the red wave that was being, predicted to the red wedding that I was talking about. I have said for weeks to you guys privately, and I've said it on the show once or twice now publicly, I get the sense from the trends that I am looking at that this actually may be the normie election we thought we were going to have in 22. But I have residual PTSD from 22. And so this is me trying to be as objective as I can in acknowledging my PTSD, because it can work both ways, right? I can be too negative and too pessimistic because of that PTSD and miss things that are right in front of me just because I'm still gobsmacked from what happened before. So this is me trying to compensate on both of those sides of not being overly optimistic, but then not also being too rigid in acknowledging things I think I'm seeing because of what happened in 22. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. If this is true, that this is the normie election, then the conversation we need to have is that because 2 years was simply not enough time, or is when it comes to Trump versus the GOP, the normie, after all of the year Hitler and nonsense, they'd rather side with Trump than the GOP. And that means the GOP has perhaps more work to do than it's capable of.
I have wrestled with that very question. If this becomes the normie election in 24, we thought we were going to have in 22, why? And here's the answer I've come up with. Tell me what you think. That if you wanted to give Joe Biden, who you just voted for in 2020, you wanted to give him the most benefit of the doubt and say, hey, he inherited a mess. Much of the country still shut down, coming out of a scamdemic, cut the guy some slack. Okay. Again, I'm not justifying this myself. I'm trying to think like a normie does. But now we've got 2 more years of inflation, of stagflation in the economy, of incompetence, of an open border whose only real security is the human traffickers and the drug cartels that are in charge, de facto in charge down there. And now we're at the grief to profit ratio is in the red. And then they let everybody see in June that he does have dementia. They've just been lying to you about it. And then they replace him with someone who has proven to be a double-digit IQ nincompoop. And that's just, frankly, too much baggage now. That would be my answer to that question, Todd.
Yeah, that's if that's correct, that's one that makes me very uncomfortable as it applies to the Aaron's montage and the character of the politician. That level of discernment is one that will always lead to that kind of politician sooner or later, because not mentioned in there is that, oh, by the way, this is a pandemic of the unvaccinated and the draconian machinations of those first 2 years. That wasn't even part of the analysis that you laid down.
Correct.
I don't know. We need better citizens.
We just went through a primary. There was no audience for this. And there was very little attempt on the right to have an audience for what you're describing. We were among the only ones willing to entertain that. So I think much of America, regardless of how they vote, just wants to act like we all just lost our damn minds and we're just going to move on. And yeah, we're kind of all embarrassed, and let's not. That much of America wants to look at that era, those 2 years, the way that our show wants to forget that we ever said Kamala Harris would be the strongest candidate in the 2020 primary, the worst take we ever had, and just moving on. And I think that's what most Americans want to do, right and left. They just want to move on.
If that's what they want, what you just described for a Trump victory is the most precarious possible Trump victory, because it's not really
because it's within the accordance of people's comfort and not because the paradigm has changed.
Yes,
of that
there's no real light bulbs going on.
The comfort has been disrupted too much. The Biden people have disrupted their comfort too much, and so now they have to act. By the way, that's what I thought was going to happen in 22. By the way, so now I just think we're watching it happen in this cycle instead.
Well, noted, but I resent the hell out of it too, because it's not good enough. It just isn't.
It's not. But we should take the W and then try to take full advantage of it over the next 4 years as much as we possibly can, nevertheless. Yeah. All right, let's switch gears. Unless you got anything else on this front, Aaron, we good?
I think we're good.
All right, let's switch gears and get to Pop Culture Tuesday, when we look at the intersection between what is trending in pop culture and then what we're trying to conserve here as conservatives. And Aaron, how old were you the first time you ever saw the Leon Lett video from the Super Bowl?
Oh, I probably would have been a teenager.
Okay, so you'd been around for a while. You were following sports for a while. So it wasn't like something that generationally,
no,
like the Doug Flutie Hail Mary pass. You would have seen that almost like right away when you became a football fan as a kid, right? Well, when Todd and I were in, if you were a Gen Xer, I mean, Leon Lett getting caught from behind by Don Beebe in that Super Bowl because he is strutting, styling and profiling for the cameras in a game that the Cowboys are already up by 50. And Don Beebe runs him down from behind by about 50 yards to strip the ball. And then it happened to Leon Lett again the very next year. The Cowboys were playing on Thanksgiving Day in a blizzard in Dallas against the Miami Dolphins, and he did it again. The Cowboys are going to win because they blocked a field goal attempt from the Dolphins, and instead of just letting it roll, he tried to pick it up and run with it. Got stripped. The Dolphins got the ball back and then won the game. Okay, these were, cultural edicts and treatises were written at the time about this. And is this sports culture? Is it hip hop culture? And there were racial elements of it too, and everything else. Okay. But this was a big thing at the time, and Leon Lett, people forget how great of a player he was, but he's going to be known forever for those two plays, particularly the one in the Super Bowl. All right. I've not seen anything close to that until this happened again in the NFL this past weekend. This is the Commanders, formerly known as the Redskins, hosting the Bears. And if you're watching on YouTube or Blaze TV, we're going to let you actually see this play. All right. So this is a defensive back for the Chicago Bears. As Washington is lining up now. All right. He is lining up. The play is going on. He's over there running smack and everything else at the fans of the Commanders after the play has already been snapped. He quickly then has to run into the field of play. And you can see him there trailing the play. He's the one then that tips the ball to the Commanders in the end zone for them to win the game on one of the most improbable plays in NFL history. We're going to be watching that play for our entire lives. We're going to be watching that play. And I've got to get, starting with Todd especially, the reaction to what to that kind of a play. And is it just a sports play, or is there cultural commentary here, Todd?
Well, the only difference that I have with you in your initial analysis is you said we haven't seen anything like that since. This is my problem. I see this every single weekend, which is why I hardly watch anymore. I did see online the reaction of a group of men who were Bears fan watching and their reaction afterwards. Guys, this is like it. Yeah, this is a extreme version of what happens every weekend, but it's the same version. Why are we tying ourselves so emotionally? That's not unique. That level of arrogance, that level of contempt for they don't care about you. They don't know who you are. They think it's ridiculous you care as much as you do. Why? Why are you so, whether it's that outcome on that kind of play or any other one, why are we so tethered to this? None of which is to say, like, I enjoy sitting down and watching a good football game. Still, really do. But that's the question we need to ask ourselves, because the pulling out of hair afterwards, how is this really any different than any other Sunday? And how warped grown men's emotions are about what they're watching. I don't think there's anything unique about this. Him taunting you like that is perfect. That's what this whole sport increasingly thinks about you. And we spend more and more money on it and spend more of our time while ignoring more and more of our priorities and the things that actually matter. I think this is just fitting.
I don't know. I think
Aaron,
there's in the younger generation of football players, you see this every now and then. I kind of wish they cared less than the fans did, because sometimes when they're getting trolled online by some dude bro who lost a bet thanks to them or lays it at the feet of the player, they're in their mentions all the time, and the players take that seriously. And it's like, I wish you kind of cared a little bit less about fill in the blank 69 me on social media has to say about your supposed play. I don't know. I just think it's a funny moment.
So you don't think there's any cultural subtext here at all?
No. Okay, premature celebrations have been around my entire life. I've seen numerous viral videos. I mean, I think there was one that happened at the Olympics maybe this year of a track and field. It was like a qualifying round or something like that, if I remember correctly. Or maybe it wasn't even track and field. It was some sort of race where it was just celebrating or pulling up early, and then you got passed. That's just a tale as old as sport, basically. Is that a good thing? No. Is it even benign? No. But I think if anything else, it's just an indication of human nature. When you think you've got something in the bag, and then you start celebrating before it really is, these things can happen. I mean, it's just and that's kind of Murphy's Law playing out.
It's a perfect visual for NIL. It's a perfect visual for the transfer portal. Me. That moment wasn't about the team at all. You're going to get more of that. You're going to get that quality of player. You're going to get that quality of young man. It's inevitable. None of this, the way we're doing it, makes you smarter, as I've said before, or more ethical. Look at that. But look in the mirror, everybody, because you're all a part of it. You just said there's too much money. There's no standards other than that. This is what you get.
I will say I watch a lot of football like you do, Aaron, and Todd has in his lifetime. And you're right, Aaron. Premature celebration is not something unique. Okay. What I have not seen a lot of, however, is a guy taking it to the extremes of the play has already started for a couple of seconds before he is so absorbed into what he is doing and his own vamping that he is unaware of the fact that the play has already begun, and then joins the play late so that he can then become the one that volleyballs the ball to the other team's receiver for the game-winning touchdown. That is not something I have seen before.
No, the fans are way ahead of a curve on that. He was just doing fan behavior, totally detached from reality, caring way too much about this. Man, it's poetry. the level of validation that comes on a daily basis about my sports bro theories is cosmic, quite frankly.
That persuades you at all, Aaron?
No. No, every premature celebration is unique in its own way, but
did the Bears put out a statement of apologies or anything?
That guy did.
Yeah, he did. Yeah, he did. Yeah, he did. All right, final thoughts. We got about less than a minute here. Final thoughts on today's show.
I think it's they have Mondays off, and I think it's Tuesdays where they come in and watch film.
Mm-hmm.
I would love to be a fly on the wall in that film study.
Yeah.
That would be fun.
Brutal. Yes. Absolutely.
I told Todd when he came in this morning, did you watch the entirety of Monday Night Football last night? I had it on because
I totally forgot it was even on last night.
I thought about Todd last night because I think he would appreciate this and love this. The Giants were driving on the at the end of the game, trying to do a short out pass, and they reviewed whether or not the receiver got out of bounds in time. Made no difference whatsoever because all the time they spent reviewing, the offense just got lined back up again. Replay review is the devil.
You're where Todd is at now?
Yes.
You're there?
Yes.
You're there. Romans 8:28.